Hello all, this is Barbara Mann from Your Empowered You, and welcome to our video on the importance of informal leaders. So in this short video, we're going to talk about who are your informal leaders in your organization, why they're extremely important to the organization, and how leadership usually interacts with these folks, whether it's negatively or positively. So let's talk about who are informal leaders. So these are the people, the employees, and people who aren't necessarily in leadership. Maybe they are in leadership, but mostly I'm talking about the frontline associates who we're going to focus in on this video on informal leadership. So these are the people, the employees, who are perceived as the voice of the employees. They're really perceived as having the courage to stand up for the group. They're usually very confident. They're smart. They're influential. Really, that's the key in leadership, is they're influential. Oftentimes, they ask very pointed questions and make comments in public forums. So sometimes leadership doesn't mind this. Sometimes they do, and that's what we'll talk about a little bit about the perception of informal leaders from a leadership perspective. They may or may not be well liked by employees. Sometimes I've seen informal leaders very well liked by the employees. I've seen others not so much. And management may perceive some of these folks as troublemakers. And we're going to talk about, really it is advantageous for everybody to work with any type of leader in your organization, whether it's a formal leader, whether it's an informal leader. It just makes for a much more productive, cohesive, collaborative type environment. So why are these informal leaders so important to an organization? Because really they have a pretty good pulse of how the employees are thinking, how they're feeling. These people are usually very open and honest with management, kind of like, tell you what people are thinking, what's going on the floor. They give you that pulse. That's important. And they'll tell you the issues out loud. So I like this. Personally, I like it to know what the issues are out loud versus never knowing and there's grumbling going on in your operation and maybe you don't know about it. I'd rather know how people are feeling and discussing it out loud than versus just having this undercurrent of low morale. But they can provide extremely valuable perceptions of how employees are thinking, how other solutions can be approached. They're usually great, like, hey, maybe we should think about this. You need to make sure that people have a safe environment so that they can express themselves. But they provide a lot of valuable feedback for the pulse of the operation, also for seeing things that may or may not be working in your operation. So even though they provide, when I'm saying about feedback, it could be constructive and it could be positive. These are really, really important people to make sure we use as our advantage as leaders. So how does management interact with these folks? Let's talk about the negative. And this is what I've seen a lot of times when the negative approach. Because sometimes managers perceive these people as the troublemakers. And they're really not troublemakers. They're actually more of a blessing and a gift to management, if anything. But they try to kind of, sometimes if management works negatively, they're working against them. They're perceived as the enemy. Maybe they try to, reassign them to another department. They try to restrict their voice. Maybe the manager's trying to gather like allies. And it's just, the bottom line is that you should not have a resistance towards any group, anything in the operation. It's really trying to work together to make it more productive for the whole entire team. So my advice on managers who try to resist or try to squash, I guess, people's voices, don't do that, because it's never going to work. It's going to make it far, far worse than working with these informal leaders. And it's much more productive. So let's talk about how managers work with folks like this on the positive side. My suggestion, if you're a new manager, you seek out those informal leaders first. They're important. They influence the team. They influence other people. They have leadership skills. So let's work with them. Use them to help the operation by asking for input, asking, hey, what do you think about this? What do is there a solution to X, Y, or Z? Allow them to head up committees and be part of the solution versus part of the problem. Have them come up with potential solutions along with their colleagues, but use them to help solve problems. Work with them versus against them. We talked a lot about this. When you resist something, it really is, what it does is it produces like a counter resistance. So working with these folks and bringing out the best in everybody is really the best approach to take. So once you involve informal leaders in the rest of the group, they can be your greatest advocates. If their voice is heard and you take their suggestions and change is implemented and they're part of the solution, there's a lot of pride that goes into that. So they can be your greatest advocate. So I can't stress that enough. You want to make sure that your informal leaders are your advocates. And if change can't be made, because sometimes what I've noticed is that informal leaders or other folks that maybe not be perceived as informal leaders, they'll want to do this big, huge change that maybe it's not realistic at the time. However, there's probably something that can be changed. So help work with the things that can be changed. So if they come up with some idea that is just really probably not feasible, let's steer them on what can be changed. Again, it's not a matter of always getting what everybody wants all the time. This is a matter of implementing what you can that will help the operation. And one thing that's really, really important for informal leaders is you make sure you acknowledge them, you respect them, recognize them, and reward them. And sometimes maybe they don't want recognition and reward, but definitely acknowledgement and respect. So if they have spearheaded a project, make sure that everybody is aware that this person, went out on a limb and came up with a solution to whatever. So really work with them and delegate maybe some of the responsibility to these informal leaders. You can really do a lot with these people. They're very, very important. So let's wrap this up up in a bow. Identify your informal leaders quickly if you're new to an operation. Understand their importance and their influence because they do have a lot of influence. They provide great feedback. They provide great perspectives. It may not be in a way where you're receiving it very well, but see, that's something that you can coach them towards, where they're providing constructive criticism in a constructive way versus a defensive way. That's just a coaching thing. But really what you're after is the feedback, which really sometimes they're speaking on behalf of the group, and their perspective. It's important to know the pulse of an operation. Always work with informal leaders, or anybody for that matter, versus against them. You work against people and life becomes very, very difficult. Your operation is not as productive. You'll end up with low morale. It just does not work. Work with informal leaders. Don't work against them. Utilize their help and other people in the operation by solving issues collaboratively. If they have a great idea and it can work, more power to them. Have it implemented. Have them take charge of how it's going to be implemented, and you can be the mentor, the coach, or the project lead to kind of oversee if it's really working within your operation. But have them solve the issues collaboratively. Everybody likes to work in collaborative environments, so this is a perfect opportunity. And lastly, always recognize, respect, and appreciate all your employees, obviously. Anybody in your operation, that's a given. But if people who are your informal leaders are really, approaching you and they're having their voice heard, because it does take courage to do this too, recognize, respect, and appreciate. So I hope you've enjoyed our short video on the importance and the influence of informal leaders and how you can really work to help them be your advocates. They're very important people. Trust me, I've had them in every single operation, and I have made mistakes. And I've learned from those mistakes, and I've had them be where they were some of the best people that I ever worked with in my career. So thank you for attending our short video, and for additional resources or to schedule a session with me, please visit my website at www.yourimpoweredyou.com. Email me at bman@yourimpoweredyou.com. or give me a call at 916-633-2555. And I thank you very much and have a very empowered day.